Okay, computer says it's 7 o'clock. Can I ask for any members of officers in physical attendance of an electronic device to mute it to avoid feedback? Can I ask for any remote participants keep their camera and microphone off unless they wish to speak, and ideally not use the camera facility at all, as this can affect the quality of the meeting. Please be advised that this meeting is going to be recorded, and data collected during the recording of this meeting will be retained in accordance with the Council's data retention policy. The recording of the meeting may be added to the Council's website. Members accessing the meeting remotely should use their Smile or KCC laptop to participate virtually. I think I had to read that out. All right, I'd like to welcome everyone to the hybrid local plan panel meeting, including any visiting members attending remotely and members of the public. I'd like to advise that the following staff are in attendance in the Council chamber or remotely. The Head of Planning Services, James Freeman, the Planning Policy Manager, Jill Peat, the Conservation and Design Manager, Simon Algar, Natalie Earle, the Senior Planner, and Democratic Services, represented by Kelly McKenzie and Billy Attaway. Are there any other officers in attendance that have not already been named? Can't find it. I think that's a no. Right, the emergency evacuation procedure. Right, there is not a planned evacuation drill due to take place tonight. If the alarm sounds, it will be genuine and it will sound like ringing bells. The closest emergency exit is there. From the council chamber, the closest emergency exit is the external fire escape that leads from the council chamber. Secondary exit, in the event that this is blocked, is staircase 1, the main staircase that leads down from the lift lobby. In the event of the alarm sounding, everybody must leave the building via the nearest safe available exit and gather at the assembly points at the far side of the car park. The lifts must not be used in the event of an evacuation. Any officers present at the meeting will aid with the evacuation. Please can I be informed if there's any person who is disabled or unable to use the stairs so that we can make suitable arrangements in the event of an emergency. Nobody must leave the assembly point until everybody can be accounted for, and nobody must return to the building until the chairman has informed you that it is safe to do so. Okay, are there any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chairman. There are no apologies for absence. Thank you.
Okay. First, we have to approve minutes. Firstly, of the virtual meeting held via Skype on Wednesday, the 15th of December, 2021. Does anybody have any comments to make on those meetings regarding their accuracy? Can we take them as approved? Agreed. And the minutes of the local plan panel on the 17th of February 2022. Anybody got any corrections to make to those minutes? Can we take them as approved? Excellent, thank you. Let me define them. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Bonney.
Thank you. On item 5, so I've got a disclosable non-pecuniary interest. My parish council obviously responded to that, and also on item 7, I've got property in the Robertsham Conservation Area, but I remain open to the discussions and ideas in all of those.
Okay. Any others? Okay, I'd like to advise you the items on the agenda today are Part A reports for recommendation to Cabinet. Agenda item 5 is the Swale Local Plan issues and preferred options main issues. And I'll ask Jill to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. The report before you sets out the main issues raised through the Regulation 18 consultation that took place at the end of last year. Members will recall the Regulation 18 document contained a series of questions seeking views on the issues facing the borough and how these issues could be addressed through the local plan review. This included development strategy options and the preferred option of having a more even distribution of the total requirements across the main urban centres when combined with allocations in the current adopted local plan bearing fruits. In response to the Reg 18 consultation, we had 3,477 individual responses, and these are summarised in the table in Appendix 1 of the report. Broadly speaking, the main issues raised predominantly focused on local housing need and the distribution of growth. There is considerable support amongst residents and local organisations for challenge in the use of the standard method and in the level of local housing need arising, citing the borough's constraints, natural and landscape designations, flood risk and infrastructure limitations as the main justifications in taking such an approach. Unsurprisingly, this was not an approach supported by those promoting development sites. Reasons as to why Swale should meet its needs included the amount of unconstrained land available, that the environmental constraints are not unique in the case of Swale, and that not meeting housing needs in full would exacerbate housing affordability problems and hinder economic growth as well as delivery of infrastructure. The Council will need to present additional robust evidence as to why meeting needs wholly within the borough is no longer possible if this is the case. The Council would need to satisfy the local plan inspector that all potential sources of housing supply had been robustly explored and tested, that the Council had ultimately left no stone unturned in doing all possible to meet its local housing need. Responses relating to the distribution of growth fell into two categories: residents and other groups who opposed one or more of the options, which would see development take place in a particular part of the borough, and those landowners, developers and agents who supported the option or options as they saw it being the best fit to achieve their aims of securing development of their sites. Comments on the preferred option and other options equally raised concerns on common themes relating to infrastructure capacity, including highways, wastewater, health and education, air quality, settlement and landscape character, and the loss of countryside and agricultural land. Statutory consultees commented that there would be a need to clearly demonstrate and evidence why option 3 was preferred, and KCC highlighted that this option appeared, based on the currently available evidence, to have a significant detrimental impact on the road network, but that there were no obvious alternatives that could deliver the quantum of development required by the standard method within the timescale of the local plan review period without creating significant impacts on traffic and air quality in the borough. The proposal for this report is that the main issues raised in the representations to the Regulation 18 consultation be noted. Thank you.
Okay, any questions on the report? Councillor Thomas.
Excuse me. Thank you, Chair. I've got 3 questions. Do you want me to ask them all at once or one at a time?
Let's eke it out.
Yeah, okay. I mean, firstly, I'd just like to kick off by saying that it's very pleasing we had all the responses about the local housing need, and that was very interesting, and a lot of the comments were quite understandable. First question, hopefully it's relatively straightforward. It's on paragraph 2.8, talking about the early evidence gathering. Well, what I wanted to clarify, what was that time? Because it says the evidence concluded there was no justification to take a different approach at that time. I was trying to get a bit of perspective as to the time scales here.
And that was evidence that was presented, I believe, in the autumn of 2019, but Jill could probably come up with some more robust details.
That is about right. Things are often a little bit uncertain, and at that time we didn't have absolute certainty around what our local housing number was likely to be using the standard method. So we asked consultants to look at a sort of a worst case and a best case scenario, so we had a broad range. And as part of that work, we commissioned a specialist demographer to look at how the population of Swale compared with the data used to make the projections, and whether or not there were any exceptional circumstances, because that's the direct words in the NPPF and in the guidance, whether or not we had any exceptional circumstances that would justify a departure from using the standard method. And we didn't. But it's definitely worth having another look. And that's what we plan to do.
I'd also point out in paragraph 2.9, it says it is important to recognise there's a difference between seeking to justify a housing need lower than the figure calculated using the standard method and concluding that a certain level of lower LHN cannot be accommodated within the borough.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jill. My next question follows on quite nicely from what the Chair was just saying in paragraph 2.9. I wanted to know at what point in the local plan process will the issues that are raised in this paragraph be considered as to whether the local housing need can or cannot be accommodated within this borough?
Jill.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, we have to make sure that as officers we are doing everything we can, leaving no stone unturned, and I'll probably get a t-shirt made up with that on it at some point, because that is the expectation. If you look into the fine detail of what's in the National Planning Practice Guidance, what's in the NPPF, the National Planning Policy Framework, it's very, very clear that the expectation is that we will meet our local housing need as a minimum. So what we need to do is we need to be in a position where we can, with complete confidence and certainty, say we have left no stone unturned and looked at every conceivable option to deliver our housing need. And these are the reasons why we can't do it. It's not something that has been successfully achieved by any of the 50 or so local authorities in the country that have these very grave concerns. But there are a couple that have now submitted their plans to the Secretary of State, or are at or about to go to Reg 19 stage, and we're watching very closely what they're doing. So We're working closely with KCC as the Highways Authority and with National Highways and with our neighbouring authorities around how we can identify what capacity exists and how much housing can be delivered. But it's complicated and it's a very specialist area of planning. And that's what we're doing in that regard. Additionally, we've opened another call for sites where anybody with any land that hasn't already been considered, anybody that wants to can promote land. And it may be that there's some sites that haven't come forward before that that can be delivered without creating problems. Okay.
Sorry. Thank you, Jill. I wanted just to follow up on that. So would that be before Regulation 19 or during Regulation 19?
We would have to do that before Reg 19.
Right.
Okay. When you submit your Reg 19, it's based on that evidence that you've gathered.
And the last question is in relation to paragraph 2.15 on the following page. And I'm just noting, with no surprise really, that respondents had raised the concerns of infrastructure, highways, wastewater, health, education, etc. And from a personal point of view, I often feel that swales, air quality management areas, unfortunately, are not treated with the respect that local residents expect and deserve. And I too often see that the mitigation considered and proposed is probably the cheapest, which is always a disappointment. So my question really is, how might this authority, planning authority, this is a tough one really, challenge utility companies, maybe the clinical commissioning groups, education authorities, on their often inadequate responses to the potential demands of large developments? Because that's the question as councillors we get challenged by our residents quite frequently. Thank you.
We are in communication constantly with the Highways Authority, KCC, and I think it's fair to say that the CCG was rather late to the party in terms of understanding what should be their role in the local plan and in planning applications. But I know that Councillor Bonney has been pushing the importance of this on them quite extensively. I don't know if you can add anything to that, Councillor Bonney.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So over the last few months, I've been having meetings with the CCG, particularly focusing on Sittingbourne area. And I was actually going to ask you a question on that, because their response is, oh, well, this will need to be carefully considered. I think my concern and that of many of the residents is they've not even provided sufficient facilities for the existing population, let alone what we put forward in a new plan. And I've somewhat been belly aching to them about the significant shortfall in healthcare provision in Swale, but really drilling down hard on Sittingbourne, which has historically seen obviously significant housing growth. And, you know, we've got the evidence of probably one of the worst GP ratios in the country. And there is no plan that I can see or lay my hands on from CCG to say how they solve that current issue. And I think that's obviously reflected in, you know, various comments that sort of threaded through this document and responses. Is, I suppose, from a council perspective, that is actually a really key thing from economic development point of view, because if you don't have a healthy population and good access to those healthcare facilities. So what the CCG have finally agreed to for the first time ever, they're going to do a strategic needs review of healthcare in Sittingbourne. Never been done. So I think that's a bit of a breakthrough. However, I was in the middle of COVID at the time, so it was about 3 weeks ago. They said it would take them a couple of weeks to sort out the commissioning of this work. Not heard anything. So I'm just wondering, Jill, whether you've or any of your team have been contacted by the CCG to provide any evidence to them, because we would obviously be looking at some population stats, because they will have to come out and consult not just with GPs but with healthcare providers. But also, my understanding from that meeting is they would speak to the public, and the public would be able to give their views on what they think of their local healthcare provision. So I think that's an extremely important piece of work the CCG need to undertake, and hopefully within the next few months we will start seeing how big those holes are, and I think that's really important for this piece of work.
Thank you. And regarding education, we've had officers in. There's been quite a lot of talk about especially secondary school provision, different options available. Primary provision tends to be a less pressure on that to get those delivered, but of course a lot of the hold up has been caused by KCC's own approach to the Northwest Sittingbourne development, where a school was due to come online, but because they agreed, the Highways Department agreed that traffic could go south down through Sonora Fields instead of up out through the Grovehurst roundabout as proposed in the local plan. Well, they haven't got a road for their school, so that is taking longer. A bit more joined up thinking and strategic planning from our county partners wouldn't go amiss. Eddie, you're going to come back?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Following on from that, really, my question is with the with these statutory consultees, utility companies, whatever, when they come back and say no comment or no, I don't need anything, what can we do to challenge that? Because it seems to me too often they say, I'm fine, I don't need any money, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, James, I know, is this a James question or a Jill question?
Well, we have had infrastructure delivery meetings, so we tended to invite all the statutory agencies, etc., into those meetings and have these discussions with them, so they're fully abreast of what we're attempting to do and engage with them. But you still get responses on the odd occasion from those agencies saying X, Y, and Z. Ultimately, that's what a local planning inspector will receive at an examination. But quite rightly, members are challenging some of those assumptions that they're making, or some of the proposals that they're making. So we do go back to them and raise those issues with them, but ultimately they are the provider.
Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I pick up my own question, let me say I do support much of what's been said, and I want to tackle the same issue, but highways and health and so on, I need to speak carefully about health in my area, given that my GP is sitting just in front of me. But you know, there are those problems right across the borough. But I'd like to pick up one other, and you said specifically, and it's in the report somewhere, Jill, that unsurprisingly, developers said environmentally sensitive areas are not excessive. Now, I did some work with your predecessor, which was a few years ago, but things won't have changed, that indicated that somewhere in the region of 50 to 55% of the whole of Swale was a national or international environmentally protected area. So that includes AONBs, SSSIs, SPAs, Ramsar, and I might have missed one or two. Now, are you happy that that phrase is in your report? I mean, clearly it's repeating what the developers say, but it's patently rubbish. I would suggest if you went to any developer and said, show me another borough, certainly in the southeast of England, which has over half of its landmass as a nationally or internationally designated environmental protection area, they would be unable to identify that. And it worries me that kind of we're letting them get away with that sort of statement. I mean, I can make any statement I like about infrastructure or highways or house building or whatever, but it has to be a justified and accurate statement. Thank you.
I think we have to look at this paper as reporting on the responses, and it has to give a fair picture of those responses, even where we think that they might be disputable. I mean, some of the other responses we may not feel accord with the evidence, but we have to report them in this so that the local plan panel is, made aware of them. And by highlighting those issues, it then gives us the avenue to actually rebut them and say, exactly what you've said, because they've highlighted it. I think it's even higher than 55%. Jill?
I've been working on a figure of 60%. So yes. So yes. I mean, but the point is that what developers are saying is that our circumstances are not unique, and of course they are unique because Swale is unique. But actually, if you look at Tunbridge Wells, there's 78% area of outstanding natural beauty. You look at Sevenoaks, they're whatever percent they are of AONB and Greenbelt. I believe the point they're trying to make is that we are not unique in the sense that most of the Kent authorities have considerable constraints, yet they are still managing to progress with plans that meet their local housing needs. But of course, what colour things are on a map is only one part of the puzzle.
And of course, most of the most of our fellow authorities in Kent are actually struggling. They keep getting knocked back, and it is proving very difficult to come up with schemes that are going to be, local plans that are going to be acceptable or that will actually work. So it's not uncommon across Kent. Councillor Bonny.
Yeah, so going back briefly to healthcare, I think one of the things that's obviously the CCG is now at the point where they are looking to plan or bring together a plan for their future services in Swale. I think concern here is that they are somewhat, I suppose, behind where we are in terms of our local plan, but also it's about the delivery and the ability to deliver and in what time frame. I mean, I understand that just to get an extension on a surgery can take 5 years if you go through all the hurdles, the different processes, etc. So from the initial idea of either moving or expanding those facilities, healthcare facilities, that actually that lag period, if you work it in our plan period, is that actually that lag factor is huge, and their ability to deliver those, because it does have a profound impact on on our health and well-being, and also on our business communities.
Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. You'll probably be surprised, but I agree with everything that's been said so far as well. I think been a bit more positive than I have been in the past, but now I'm going to be negative. I do think though that with the conversations we're having, I still do think we should have been having 2 years ago, when we should have done a Reg 18 then, and then started talking about this. But I do think we do need to start moving forward, and we're in a better place now than what I'd considered probably a year ago. What I am concerned about is the moving this forward, and I think what residents and developers and all the other organisations have said has been no surprise whatsoever with this consultation. I'm probably more surprised that there wasn't one option, or whichever option came out. I thought some residents may be getting behind something at least to stand out a bit more. But we can see that the problem we've got, that even if they did, would we actually be able to deliver anything that they want? And the answer is probably no. And I think what is going to be happening is that we're probably going to be in a position where we do have to just deliver the housing numbers without any fight against that. And we probably just have one option on the table that we're going to have to go with, and that'll be it. And residents will still be saying the same, that they don't want this housing, and we're going to have hard decisions to make when it comes forward. But what we're saying about, completely agree about no stone unturned. I think we are in a position now that we need to make sure that everything is completely rock solid, and we have got all the duty to cooperate done properly, and make sure that we have got all the traffic modelling done. But then in here we do also see that the government pushing us to have everything done by December 23, in the chief planner's letter saying this as well. But what actually, this is what the question is, what are government actually going to do if we miss that? Because we're seeing at the moment that there's lots of local plans being pulled, government aren't doing anything at all. So my view would be that we need to look to see if we can do something different to the standard method. We need to make sure everything is done properly and not rushing through just because government say we need to do it by December 23. If they're not going to do anything anyway, let's make sure we get it right and do it properly.
Thank you. And the reason that 2 years ago we were accelerating the process because we were facing a 1,400 a year target, and it was very late. Years have gone wrong thanks to COVID. But it was very late 2020, or even possibly early 2021. But it was confirmed that the new algorithm, the so-called mutant algorithm, wasn't going to be used, and that we could go back to the 1087 or 1054 model, by which time we'd virtually got a Reg 19 in place. So to have then not gone ahead with that Reg 19, not got the consultant responses that we got, because as you'll have noticed from this, you put a Reg 18 out and a lot of the statutory consultants don't really respond. They don't really engage with it. But when it's a Reg 19, they do have to engage because they may have to defend their position or advocate their position at the inspection. So by running that Reg 19, we did get very useful responses, which we wouldn't have done if we'd have gone on Reg 18. So I think we're in a stronger position now. But yeah, that was the reason we had to accelerate, because we were trying to avoid a 1,400 a year target. There is talk, and a lot of talk, that there is going to be possibly a new algorithm, that there's going to be movement of housing up north. We can't rely on that until it actually happens. If it does happen and they reduce our numbers, that'd be very welcome. But I can see the whole of Kent panicking to reach a December 2023 deadline, as you say. it could be most of Kent that doesn't meet that deadline, but we have to demonstrate that we're trying to meet it, and we can't just make it look like we're not, we're not giving it the due respect. We have to show that we're progressing as best we can, and then see, hopefully, if there is a change, we'll no doubt be here again looking at another Reg 18 or a Reg 19, but yeah, but it'll be a happier one. Councillor Bonning.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, you know, there's that. I think all the years I've sat on this panel, planning has always been in a state of flux. There's always been, it's been a constant sea of changes, isn't it? Every few months, something different, something's being tweaked. It never stands still. So, you know, we get thrown massive targets and then they're pulled and go back a step. And I mean, I think that's just indicative of the chaos of government. However, I think what we've seen, we've obviously had a pandemic, and that has had a profound impact on Swale, on the population, how it works, its habits. And actually, I think for the future, and certainly for the next 5 years and into our new plan period, that will continue, and that gives us an opportunity to take advantage of that knowledge and understanding of the changes and new ways of working, a lot more people working from home. Actually, that has a profound impact on people, how they view property, where they want to live, their lifestyle choices. But also, we're staring down the barrel right now of a major economic disaster, inflationary one, which will have major consequences for the delivery of housing going forwards. Potentially, we could face, I mean, you know, we've been through where we've been before with recessions and delivery of housing, but we have to assume, you know, with local plans that we carry on. It's a world where you carry on and you assume all is the same, be it that reality is actually pretty different and very divorced from it.
Well, you know, as we heard last night, Rainbow Housing Company, the costs are spiralling, and I know people who are small builders who are, you know, facing cement price increases within the last 2 months of about 30%. How this unfolds on imposed targets, whether or not it's going to have a, you know, there needs to be a, well, reluctant to use the word reset, because some people have some ideas about the big reset, but something needs to be done. But we aren't the ones who can do it. We just have to trail along and wait for somebody to actually see the, you know, smell the coffee. Anyone else? Councillor Henderson.
Just to follow on from Councillor Bonnie, I mean, it's actually even more serious than she outlines. My business is down in Rochester. Things carry on as they are. I wouldn't be able to afford to drive to Rochester and back every day. You know, there are some very extreme changes happening at the moment, and we just do not know what the impact of them will be. So I take the point.
Okay, if there's no more comments, are we happy to note the summary of main issues as per the recommendation? Agreed. Lovely. Okay, agenda item 6, local plan review next steps. You'll have probably got a flavour of it from the discussions that we've been having, but I'll hand over to Jill for this one.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this short report is setting out in some very broad detail where we are with regards to our next steps. As we've already sort of discussed it in the previous report, the transport modelling results weren't what we were anticipating, and as a result, the best way to handle that is to undertake further modelling and highway work. That will require continued close working with KCC as the Highways Authority. What we need to do is we need to sort of look at the information to find out what ability the borough has to deliver development. Again, I'm going to use the expression leaving no stone.
Sorry, Jill, I'm going to interrupt. Can I have a proposal and a seconder for the first item? Oh, I'm happy to propose. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Henderson, and those in favour, please. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Sorry.
Yep. Okay. So it's very challenging. We need to undertake further transport modelling work because we really need to investigate what we can deliver and where we can deliver it. And we need to understand what capacity exists in the network. So members will be aware, I'm sure, that we have an LDS on the website, a local development scheme on our website that was approved last year. And it has February to April programmed in for this next stage of the local plan review. And it's just not possible to progress to that draft plan stage, Reg 19, without this information. So we have to wait until we've got an agreed timescale with our partners before we can sort of finalise all of the other bits of information that we need to do to get to the Reg 19 stage. As I mentioned previously, while the traffic modelling work is underway, and some of it is underway already, actually, we've also started another call for sites again, sort of maximising that opportunity for additional sites to be identified. And we will also be updating and refreshing our other evidence, which we will be reporting to members in due course. Now, the other reason why we're sort of not coming forward tonight with a new LDS is, of course, that Swales changes to Swales governance is on the horizon. So it's more appropriate to get that sort of done and dusted and then move forward with a firmer programme. Thank you.
I'm basically the traffic modelling, as we saw at previous meeting, did demonstrate that there are no easy answers to the challenges that we face at a 10,000 extra housing level. But you'll also notice under 3.2 the extra information that's coming from Experian, and all this, and the impact on COVID, all this will feed into considerations as we go forward. We are, of course, in a bit of limbo at the moment, in the fact that I believe this is the last local plan, and we don't have an agreed structure from the council, and hopefully we'll just agree it next week at full council, but we don't yet have an agreed structure for the future governance, so we can't put any dates in or any times in, which is a bit. Hopefully we can get that sorted out next week, and then we can start putting some dates in and actually putting some time frames together, but a bit awkward at the moment. Any questions on this report, please? Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I accept what the report is saying, and it does cover the ground, but I do wonder whether it is pushing things strongly enough in the direction which I believe the discussion on item 5 would indicate we all think, and that is that we absolutely, there is a lot of belief, I think, here, and certainly among our residents, that there are exceptional circumstances. And we've talked about any number of them. There are the environmental ones, There are the ones relating to infrastructure, to highways, to flooding, to the availability of housing land, and I may have missed one or two. And paragraph 3.2 does say, let me find, yes, as part of the update to the SHLA, work will be undertaken to investigate whether or not there are exceptional circumstances that will justify this council departing from the government standard method. Now, I would suggest that that is not strong enough, and I'd like to propose, and I hope you'll see the intention of what I'm saying. I don't mind the words in which it's said, but that is that we recommend to Cabinet that Cabinet ensures that our officers have an adequate resource to seek evidence of exceptional circumstances, and let's include the point that's been made several times, leaving no stone unturned, and taking all of the exceptional issues into account. Because I think there's a lot of clarity here that we've got to look to find exceptional circumstances, not just to have a look and see whether, well, maybe there are, maybe there aren't. And if we particularly go forward on that basis, then presumably to whatever is the local plan panel in future, we'll get a report back very clearly saying this is our analysis, and either yes, we believe there are, or no, we believe there are not. And I think that's important for us. It's important for a direction that we're asking officers to take. And I think it's especially important because we will, whatever that answer is, be able to go back honestly and say to our residents, we've looked at this and this is the way we're going to prepare our local plan. Thank you.
I'm certainly happy to endorse the idea that we get sufficient resources from Cabinet. What I would always caution is when you're looking for research, when you're looking for evidence, you cannot commission that evidence with a predetermination. So
I didn't suggest that, Mr.
But we have to be careful that we ask for the evidence, we ask them to look at, present the evidence as it is, and then the interpretations as to what that evidence is telling us comes afterwards.
Yes, but there is, I don't believe at least, there is no harm in saying we are looking for evidence of exceptional circumstances. You're perfectly right. We can't ask officers to juggle the evidence, and we certainly can't ask officers to ignore the nasty bits. But we can say that we have an objective in mind to seek whether there is sufficient extraordinary circumstance.
I would expect officers to be alert to the possibility of findings that would indicate that, but I will ask Jill to give the officers official response.
Well, actually, I believe that is something that happens automatically. So, for example, we are having a refresh of our strategic housing market area assessment evidence. And as part of that work, the specialist consultants involved in that process will look and see if there are any circumstances that would justify a departure from the standard method. So the suggestion that we need to have additional resources to help us identify and prepare evidence that would support a position that would justify not meeting our local housing needs is something that happens as a matter of course in the same way that the evidence looks to make sure we have left no stone unturned in making sure we identify sufficient sites to meet our local housing needs. Because at the end of the day, a planning inspector will need to see that the evidence is robust and that it has been prepared in accordance with best practice, that it complies with national policy, that it complies with national guidance. So whether or not we can justify a position one way or the other will happen as a matter of course.
Yeah, if you want to come back, yes.
Yeah. Sorry, if I can just come back very briefly. First of all, I didn't ask for additional resource. I asked for adequate resource. And I think it is always important that we try to direct and make sure that officers have adequate resource. Now, if that means a bit extra, so be it. But if not, then that's not a problem. Doing it all in the absolutely proper way of looking for evidence, that does go without saying. But I don't think anything happens automatically. I think it is justified, I think, that members try to give a steer that we are, and certainly all I'm simply saying is this meeting would like to make it very clear that that is an important part of what officers will be doing over the next 6 months. And that's the only reason I'm suggesting that we make that recommendation to Cabinet. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, James, what would be the position of that recommendation on that basis?
I must admit, I'm feeling a bit uncomfortable. If that came out in the public, that could be challengeable, I think. So I would suggest that we just go forward with the evidence. You know, we are aware of the issues that have been raised by members in this meeting as well. So that will be looked at in terms of the evidence that's being supported. So I'm just a bit cautious on that front.
Okay, is it on this, Councillor Whelan? Go on then.
It's a couple of years ago now when we were talking about the local housing need, and historically it had been about 550 a year, and then it was bumped up to somewhere around the 800 or 900, and then the government demanded 1400, and it was during that period when these special circumstances came up, and it dealt with roads and highways, schools provision, general infrastructure in some detail. So when we say we've got to look into it, it's been looked into it, and a lot of information was gathered and presented to this panel. And the only major gap was highways and vehicles movements, and that was down to KCC we were waiting for, and the air pollution that was generated by it. So I think most of the work's been done, and it wasn't just us, although it was special circumstances, it was nearly every local authority in Kent had similar situations about lack of infrastructure from government. So, you know, I think officers are already very mindful and most of the evidence is already there.
Councillor Gould.
Thank you. I think one thing that is very important is that when we're communicating this, is that we look at the standard of evidence that we're being asked to work to. A good example is air quality, where many people will feel that actually we ought to be working to World Health Organization standards, that those are safe standards that should be implemented, but they're not the standards that we can apply because of the rules that are around this. We've got to work, as Jill said, to the national standards. And I think that's something that does need to be communicated, is the standard of evidence that we are being required to use, which may be quite at variance from what people feel is happening, for example, on traffic, or other bodies like the World Health Organization on air quality would feel is a reasonable thing. So I think just to say the evidence isn't there, we have to say, well, actually, we're constrained in the way we look at the evidence because of the national guidance. And I think that sort of thing is something that needs to be communicated well, because we'll need to communicate that down the line, and that we need to be able to point out the constraints about the evidence when things aren't self-evident.
Yes, excellent point. Councillor Hunt.
Yeah. The same. I think it's down to communication. I think it's need to be somehow taking residents along and explaining the situation and why they're making the decisions that we are going to have to be making. But from everything that's been said, and this sort of goes back to the previous agenda items and what I said about time, and it's clear that probably residents are expecting something to happen to challenge that number. It's being done anyway. If it can be done, it will come out and it will be done. But it's not a case of just going and saying, oh, let's stop everything and go and challenge that and come back and see what evidence there is. It's just, as has been said, part of that process. But what I am really concerned about, and I completely support what's being said in this report, with not doing the LDS yet and just waiting and wait till everybody else see what their timetable is. But in here it does say autumn to be in sort of an idea of being looked at. I would just sort of put caution to that and just please don't say autumn, just do what's needed. And if it's going to be into next year, then do that. I'd rather see officers have enough time. And especially, as we've said there, that we need to be looking at making sure there's the right evidence. And if it is possible to challenge, then challenging it. But officers need time to be able to do that. And I would rather say a longer amount of time and getting it right. It's not just a case of getting extra resources in. It's just officers having the time to be able to do it that we've got at the moment. That would just be my only thing. It probably, I would say, it's going to be a political decision on whether how fast we move with it. But I would just would like to see more time.
Councillor Bonny.
Just to say that I'm happy with the recommendations as they are.
Are you moving them?
Yep.
Okay. Can I have a second? I won't make that. Glyn Whelan seconding. Any more debate on that? Okay, can we vote on that? Those in favour, please show. That is unanimous. I won't get told off for not getting a second at that time. Okay, agenda item 7 is the Robinsham Green Conservation Area Review, and I'll hand straight over to Simon on this one, who's been doing a lot of work on it.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members, and good evening to our one visiting member of the Parish Council over in the corner. This is one of two pieces of work that was effectively commissioned by the Western Area Committee to incorporate into the work programme running alongside the Heritage Strategy. It's one of our long-standing, the report and agenda item 7 relates to Broadmotion Green Conservation Area. It's one of our long-standing conservation areas. And we carried out an assessment of it last year, a detailed review of its character, and went out to public consultation, and we had some very positive responses. In looking at the responses, there were some queries regarding the boundary alignment conservation area, and we realised, sort of in relation to those to that feedback, that there was there were some further changes that ought to be made to tidy up the boundary. Yes, thank you, Billy. He's put up on the screen. You can see the recommendation from our consultant was for 2 boundary changes. I think you've got, those of you in the chamber have got a map in front of you. So blue area 1 is proposed to be excluded as part of the recommended boundary changes set out in the document that went out to public consultation, and green area 1 was proposed to be included. This is not untypical of the sort of types of change, particularly for rural conservation areas where you get kind of changes to garden areas where people have extended their garden areas out into an area of agricultural land, or farmers changed the field boundary. But the other boundary changes that you can see on the map in front of you were not picked up, and you can see, looking at the existing boundary line outlined in red on the map, sorry, in brown on the map, that it cuts through the middle of some areas, so we felt it was important at this point to pick up those changes rather than to leave it, because the best practice for designation of conservation areas and sort of appraisal of them is for boundary lines to, wherever possible, avoid cutting through the middle of areas to basically reflect boundaries on the ground wherever possible. So it's frustrating it wasn't picked up earlier, but we felt it was important to try and address it now rather than leave it. So we've had some positive feedback and some suggestions for minor changes to the character appraisal document, and those have been incorporated into the appendix that you see in the report. They're relatively minor changes, just some factual changes here and there, nothing that's materially altering the general thrust of the document. So the recommendation is to support the changes that you see in the character appraisal management plan document, and to support a recommendation to effectively go back out to public consultation to ensure that the additional boundary changes that we're looking to take on board are supported by potentially affected parties. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, and the recommendation is, as per recommendation 3, that a recommendation that delegated authority be given to the head of planning services in liaison with the cabinet member for planning to make a decision on redesignating the conservation area and adopting the amended appraisal and management plan review document for development management purposes, unless the reconsultation results in the receipt of significant objections to the proposed additional boundary changes. That would mean that, providing you're in agreement with this, it wouldn't have to come back. I do think these are excellent documents. I've said it before and I'll say it again, because I think you can buy them from the council, and I don't think we've got a price tag on them yet. but obviously we don't make a profit, but I think these are great documents that people in the villages would appreciate, you know, birthday presents, Christmas presents, the works, because they are historic documents in themselves, and they're really nicely designed, they're really informative. And yeah, I'd like to think that people in 50 years' time will be reading them when you will have updated them then. Anyway, enough of that. There's 3 recommendations on page 37. I'm happy to move them. Any seconder? Councillor Gould. All those in any debate? Councillor Hunt.
Yeah. If we're going to sell these to residents, are we going to have a different map when it actually goes final? That's all right then. And there's just one question I have got on it is this one and the next one. I do fully support both of them as we go through it, but just clarification in there, because it's mentioned about current applications at the moment. My understanding is we can't use doing changes like this conservation areas to halt development at all. Have we made sure that, because it is sort of being said in both these documents, that there will be no sort of legal challenge coming back on us by sort of pushing this out and saying that? I completely agree with everything that's in there, and my understanding is that with any applications that do come forward, this is just helping to make sure that those sorts of areas are sort of considered more with any new development because of this. But I just want really just saying it so we've maybe got in the minutes that if there is any legal challenge, then it's something that has been considered.
Yes, I know, I did raise that point as well. And the response I got is, you know, these aren't to stop development or to curtail development, they are to inform development, so that the right sort of development is, you know, goes ahead and not in you know, sort of development that would impede the character of the area. Did you want to add it? No. Councillor Marchington.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to notice, and I'm all for it. It looks really good. I'd like to see more of it in the boroughs where we actually preserve the bits and pieces there. It's working well for us in Queenborough because we made Queenborough a conservation area, and I'm finding people they find they can't change the chimney pots. You know, they can't take them down. They want to knock the roofs off. It's all things. It all helps all the way down the line, and it's the only way you're going to keep what you're going to keep. And I did notice that on some of the other maps there, the housing is starting to creep towards this site, you know, and you don't want to see it surrounded and gone. So I'm all for it. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Councillor Marchington. Any more comments? Okay, those in favour of the recommendations on page 37. Those who wish to abstain? Councillor Bonney. Any against? Okay, lovely. Agenda item 8 is Tunstall, and that's on page 93. And again, I'll hand over to Simon Algar.
Thank you, Chairman. This is another conservation area. It's a work that we started before Christmas. We've been out to public consultation on, and again, we've had a very positive response from members of the public, and we've worked closely with the parish council as well on this and the Rob Motion Green one in sort of developing the document. This one, there are no further change to the boundary proposed other than those already shown in the document that was subject to public consultation. And you'll note in that we're proposing to include an area that's got some historic significance, which is referred to as Shooting Meadow. There were suggestions to include an area, a separate area some distance from the conservation area. We felt it was too far distant. There was already a group of listed buildings there which provided some important protection, but it is an area there we might possibly consider looking at an Article 4 direction in the future to sort of manage the area from agricultural development in particular buildings. So with this one, the recommendation is to note the content of the public consultation draft and of the character appraisal management strategy document and the representations made on that by interested parties, and to support and recommend to Cabinet changes to the review document proposed by officers in response to the representation received during the course of the public consultation are agreed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Slight error on my part. There is a sentence in under item 2.4 on the previous agenda item that would be removed. And that's the final sentence under agenda on point 2.4, that a decision can be made on whether to designate a new conservation area at Rodmersham Church ahead of determining. Well, that's because that's already been done, so that should be removed. Apologies for that. Any comments on Tunstall Conservation Area review? There's another excellent piece of work available for sale.
Sorry, Chair, can I just come back in? I forgot to mention as a quick update to edit the report that the reference to the Coffin Pond in the report, just an update on that the County Council is looking to carry out enhancement works to the pond, and I understand that they are going to be closing the road from the 4th of April, I believe, to initiate that work, and they're working closely with the Ecological Council, County Council's ecology team to take that forward. So that's a really positive step for the village. Thank you.
All right, really is excellent. Thank you. There's one question that we don't know the answer to, but if anybody does, on one of the monuments in the Tunstall churchyard, there is a slab and it says entrance on it. And I have been wondering what that entrance is to ever since I was a teenager. So if you've got any idea why there's a slab of entrance in Tunstall, please let us add it to future editions of the Conservation Area Review. So other than that, are we all in favour? I got a seconder, didn't I? I'm happy to propose that. Can I have a seconder? Carol Jackson. All those in favour? And it's carried unanimously. Thank you. Indeed, yes. Well, thank you all for attending local plan panels. This is the, as I said, probably the final one, unless there's some sort of emergency. And we will all hopefully reconvene in some form under a new form next week. But thank you.